Imagine finding true strength in the midst of life's chaos, just as the ancient Stoics did, by mastering your inner world instead of being swept away by external events. Consider how much energy drains from you when you constantly replay your worries, fears, and frustrations, as if your words are invisible chains holding you back. Are you tired of being defined by these old narratives? This video offers a fresh perspective, drawing from Stoic wisdom. Stop empowering what limits you and start building the life you desire. You'll learn to control your own narrative, harness the power of strategic silence, protect your journey of change, and understand why your actions speak louder than any promises or complaints. If you're ready to move beyond just talking about what happens to you and start creating what you deserve, now is the time. Stay tuned to unlock the keys that will make you the protagonist of your own story. If this resonates with you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to join our community focused on intentional living, crafting your personal narrative. Your personal narrative, the story you tell yourself and share with the world, possesses immense power, a tool often underestimated but well understood by ancient Stoics. Picture a sailor in a storm. They can't command the ocean's fury, but they control how they steer their vessel. Similarly, while we can't always dictate external events, we can choose the words we use to describe our experiences. Figures like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca didn't write merely for intellectual exercise. Their philosophies served as constant reminders to themselves. What we think, and especially what we say, plants the seeds of our reality. If, day after day, you tell yourself you are fragile, that life is an unfair burden, or that setbacks are your destiny, you're not just internalizing these beliefs, you're actively shaping them into your lived experience. The Stoic approach isn't about denying pain or hardship, but about resolutely refusing to let these circumstances dictate the tone and content of our language. They recognize that every uttered word is, in essence, a direct instruction to our minds, thereby shaping our path. At the core of Stoic philosophy lies the understanding that while we don't have absolute control over what happens around us, we possess complete dominion over our internal reactions. This is where your narrative comes into play. By constantly voicing your inadequacies, your lingering hurts, and your failures, you grant them excessive power, allowing them to define your identity. The Stoic learns to observe this urge to complain or lament and actively counteract it. Instead of replaying the drama of suffering, they consciously choose to tell a story marked by lessons learned from adversity, by resilience in difficult times, and by actions focused on future progress. This isn't about denying reality or feigning well-being. It's a firm decision to stop nourishing the mental weeds that drain your energy with your words. Changing your narrative means shifting the filter through which you interpret existence, which inevitably alters your energy, guides your decisions, and ultimately redefines your tangible reality. A Stoicism-inspired narrative is deliberate, grounded in facts, and above all, authentic. There's no room for empty lamentations that don't lead to action or for unnecessary exaggerations of personal dramas. Speaking from a Stoic perspective means speaking from the truth of the situation and with a clear intention, usually geared towards virtue or improvement. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. Emotions are part of the human experience, but it does mean consciously choosing how and when to express those emotions. When a turbulent emotion overwhelms you, silence might be a wiser refuge than impulsive words. If you choose to speak, do so to build, to inspire, to move forward. The Stoic practitioner knows their words are a calling card, a mark of their character, and that every communicative interaction is an opportunity to practice virtues like temperance, honesty, and compassion, both towards themselves in their internal process and towards others in interaction. The discipline in managing words, in consciously selecting what is said and how it is said, is a direct reflection of the inner discipline one cultivates. The Stoic trains their mind not to suppress impulses, but not to be carried away by automatic complaints, corrosive criticism, or paralyzing self-pity. They know that what comes out of their mouth is a faithful reflection of their momentary inner state. Therefore, they consciously pause before speaking impulsively. They breathe, observe the situation and their internal reaction, and then decide how best to respond. This pause, this tiny but powerful space between the external or internal stimulus and the verbal response, is where true freedom lies. It is not a silence born of fear or inhibition, but speaking only when the contribution of your words exceeds the value of silence. In this way, language transforms from a simple emotional outburst into a precise tool of self-mastery, of deep respect for oneself and the present moment. When you make the conscious and sustained decision to transform the way you narrate yourself and your life, you begin to observe tangible changes in various areas of your life. The way your environment responds to you changes, your interpersonal relationships are nourished by a different energy, and your own vitality seems to increase. You are no longer the protagonist in an endless drama, but you become the conscious architect of a new story that is just beginning to unfold. Stoicism goes beyond reading ancient texts. It is a way of life actively practiced in every word you choose, in every story you tell about yourself and others, and in every consciously chosen moment of silence. Change the story you tell yourself, and you will see how your life begins to change. It is a principle that is simple in its essence, but immensely powerful in its application. How words shape, how others treat you. In the intricate tapestry of daily human interactions, we constantly emit subtle signals about how we expect or allow others to treat us. The words we use, our tone of voice, even what we don't say, form a behavioral template for those around us. Stoic philosophy illuminates this truth. You are not only responsible for your internal emotional states, but, crucially, for how you communicate these states and experiences externally. When someone regularly expresses themselves from a position of insecurity, constant complaint, or destructive self-criticism, they send a clear message to their listeners. This recurring narrative acts as a kind of implicit manual for others, who often unconsciously learn to deal with this person from the perspective of someone they perceive as weak, insecure, or incapable of embracing challenges. The Stoic is deeply aware of the shaping power of their language, and therefore, even under the most difficult and demanding circumstances, chooses their words with extreme care. The way you speak about yourself, your circumstances, and your experiences is, in essence, a statement about how others should interact with you. If most of your conversations are dominated by complaints about what happened, verbal self-limitations regarding your abilities, or a victim role concerning events, you're not only solidifying and reinforcing this negative self-image in your own mind, but also actively inviting others to perceive it and treat you as if it were an undeniable truth. Stoic teaching reminds us that while vulnerability is an inherent part of being human, there's a vast difference between sharing it from a place of awareness and self-knowledge and doing so from impulsive emotional unrestraint. To speak with clear articulation, with genuine self-respect and respect for others, and with calm determination, even when feeling exhausted or upset by circumstances, is a tangible demonstration of self-mastery and equanimity, two cardinal virtues in the pursuit of Stoic wisdom. By maintaining composure in your communication, your environment learns that you are not someone who is passively carried away by external chaos, but that you respond to life from an internal center of calm and coherence between your principles and your verbal expression. The tone of your voice, the gaze accompanying your words, the strategic pauses you allow in conversation, and the way you do or don't react in tense situations often convey more than the words you articulate. The Stoic understands that they do not need to resort to vehemence or loudness to be respected, nor do they need to aggressively assert their viewpoint for their voice to be heard. Their mere presence, the serenity in their expression, and their unwavering ability to maintain composure amidst the storm create a natural and organic respect around them. When a person communicates from a position of inner security, respect for others, and clarity of their message, those who interact with them adjust their own behavior accordingly. This is not a manipulative technique to control others, but a conscious act of setting a standard for how one wishes to be treated. And this standard is patiently built day by day, interaction by interaction, conversation by conversation. The inherent power of Stoic speech lies in the unwavering coherence between what is verbally expressed and the actions one takes. It is not enough to demand respect or understanding from others. It is essential to demonstrate that respect and understanding first in the way one communicates with oneself and subsequently with the outside world. The Stoic sage pauses before uttering a word, weighing its necessity, its opportune moment, and the intention behind it. In this way, their personal and professional relationships transform positively, not because others miraculously change, but because they themselves have elevated the level of their own communication and, consequently, the quality of their relationships. Genuine respect and solid trust are not elements that can be begged for or demanded, but qualities that are inspired and cultivated through personal coherence and balance in dealing with others. When a person consciously chooses to express themselves from this position of authenticity and self-awareness, they become a motor of change in their environment. Their words do not poison the atmosphere with negativity, but contribute to purifying and improving it. Their words are not a painful echo of still bleeding wounds, but a silent testament to the healing process and the deep integration of important learning experiences. The Stoic understands that every word that crosses their lips has the potential to be a seed that fosters mutual respect or a barrier that builds distrust. Therefore, they speak like someone who knows they are shaping the behavior of others, not only by what they say, but above all by how they say it. In this way, their environment gradually and steadily learns to grant them the dignity and respect that they themselves grant themselves through their impeccable language and behavior, protecting your journey of change. In the complex and deeply personal journey of growth, one widespread and often counterproductive tendency is the almost uncontrollable urge to share every small step, every discovery, every bit of progress with the world. Stoicism, in its timeless wisdom, teaches us that true inner transformation is a process that should be considered intimate, almost sacred, and therefore jealously guarded from the intrusion of external opinions and hasty outward evaluations. When an individual is in the midst of a transformative process, their nascent, still unformed version is inherently vulnerable, much like a young plant that has just broken through the earth and needs to be protected and nurtured in a controlled environment before it can face the harshness of the wind and the intensity of the sun outside. The ancient Stoics intuitively understood that inner strength, that unwavering resilience of the spirit, is forged and solidified in silence and tranquility, far from prying or, worse still, critical eyes. They knew that every unsolicited opinion, every external judgment, has the potential to become a stumbling block that can subtly distract or even seriously undermine one's personal commitment to the change ahead. The urge to tell everyone about the new habits one is trying to adopt, the ambitious plans one is forming, or the challenging goals one has set can initially feel like a wave of motivation and validation. However, this urge is often nothing more than a disguised search for external approval, a need for others to acknowledge and confirm your efforts even before they have yielded tangible results. The Stoic, with their keen sense of introspection, recognizes this desire for validation and questions it without being carried away by it. They know with deep conviction that external recognition is inherently ephemeral and unstable, and that true inner change can only be achieved and consolidated when it arises from a deep personal conviction, not from the fleeting applause or momentary attention of others. For this fundamental reason, they decide to quietly advance their path of transformation, diligently working with iron discipline and unwavering patience to shape their new self, without feeling the need to announce every step to the world. In this way, their life energy is concentrated and flows directly into the process of change itself, into internal and external action, and is not dispersed by concern for one's own image or the perception of progress by others. It is precisely in the fertile ground of silence that the process of change gains unforeseen strength. By eliminating external distractions and constant comparison with others, space is created for an honest and deep dialogue with oneself. The Stoic uses this time of silence and reflection to review their actions, adjust their focus if necessary, and correct their course without the suffocating pressure of having to immediately show results or meet the expectations of others. Each day becomes a new opportunity to grow from the ground up, to solidify the strength of the newly acquired habit or mindset before exposing it to the potential harshness of the outside world. If the transformation you seek is authentic and profound, it does not need to be announced with great fanfare. Its reality will naturally become evident through your consistent actions, the serenity you exude, and the coherence you demonstrate in your daily decisions. Protecting this inner change process does not mean withdrawing into complete isolation or adopting a generally suspicious attitude towards everyone. Rather, it means wisely deciding to whom you grant access to this vulnerable and sacred space of personal transformation. The Stoic shares their progress and challenges only with people who can truly enrich their path, offer unconditional support, or inspire them to continue, and not with those who are prone to easy criticism, sow unnecessary doubts, or project their own limitations. They understand very well that the energy contained in the words of others can have a significant impact on their own path, both positively and negatively. Therefore, they carefully guard their social environment, carefully choosing their conversations, and valuing the quality and depth of their relationships more than the mere number of their contacts during this delicate growth phase. Ultimately, the process of change, having been quietly protected and nourished, becomes an inexhaustible source of inner strength. When this transformation has reached a solid maturity, the results speak for themselves and require no further explanations or justifications. The Stoic can then choose to share their story, not out of a need to seek external recognition or validation, but out of an honest desire to inspire others, speaking from the authenticity of a real experience and the deep knowledge that arises from overcoming adversity. In this way, change is no longer an empty promise or a distant goal, but becomes a tangible and robust reality, firmly built on the foundations of personal conviction and unwavering serenity. Action over words. In a world where everyone seems to compete for attention, where social networks are filled with promises, announcements, and grandiose speeches, the true Stoic chooses the less traveled path, that of silence and action. The ancient sages knew that it is much easier to talk about what one will do than to actually do it. The immediate gratification of telling your plans and receiving premature praise is a subtle trap. The brain relaxes, feeling as if progress has already been made just by the announcement, but in reality, nothing has changed until the action is implemented. Stoicism teaches that virtue lies in doing, not in talking. That is why Stoics preferred to work quietly, without seeking recognition or applause, knowing that true results require no explanation. Stoic philosophy invites us to cultivate humility and patience, two virtues that are tested when one decides to let their achievements speak for themselves. This is not about hiding your progress out of fear or insecurity, but about protecting the energy and focus necessary to build something real and lasting. If you talk about your goals too soon, you risk losing momentum, as external validation can become a premature reward that weakens commitment. The Stoic knows that strength accumulates in silence, in daily consistency, in those moments when no one is watching, but you keep going. That's where character is forged, where discipline becomes habit and progress becomes a presence that needs no words. Letting results speak is also an act of respect for yourself and others. True respect is not demanded, but earned. And it is earned through consistency, through actions, through a determination that does not depend on external recognition. When your actions begin to reflect your commitment, people notice without you having to explain it. Your environment reacts differently, your relationships become stronger, and your standing grows naturally. The Stoic understands that true influence does not come from promises, but from example. That is why they wake up every day with the intention of building something, not to impress. The strategic silence of the Stoic is not passivity, but a demonstration of power. It is the conscious decision not to waste energy on empty talk and not to succumb to the temptation of seeking premature validation. It is the confidence that good work will become evident sooner or later. Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus repeatedly emphasized that we can only truly control our actions. The result may not come immediately, but the inner peace of knowing that you have done your best is a reward that no one can take away from you. Thus, the Stoic learns to find satisfaction in the process, in every small step forward, without having to proclaim it to the world. Ultimately, letting your results speak for themselves is one of the purest forms of freedom. You are not dependent on the opinions of others. You don't waste energy justifying your decisions or competing for attention. You simply move forward, build something, and let time and evidence be your best allies. Stoicism reminds you that true success is quiet, that greatness doesn't need to be loud, and that the best validation is that which arises from commitment to yourself. When your life begins to reflect your values, when your story tells itself through your actions, then you have understood the power of action over word, mastering your inner world. A person's true strength isn't measured by what they say when all is calm, but by how they choose their words when the storm rages within. In Stoicism, this inner discipline forms the foundation of a virtuous and balanced life. The Stoics taught that self-mastery begins by controlling what emerges from your mouth. It's not about suppressing emotions or feigning composure, but about managing impulses and consciously deciding when to speak and when to remain silent. One who cannot govern their tongue can hardly control their emotions, and one who cannot control their emotions becomes a slave to their own impulses, reacting to the world instead of responding with wisdom. Language is the most direct expression of what's happening internally. When the mind is in turmoil, words are often critical, complaining, or impulsive outbursts. But the Stoic trains this sacred pause between stimulus and response. Breathe, observe, decide. This small gap is where freedom lies, where one chooses not to react immediately, but to respond from virtue and prudence. Not everything you think needs to be said, and not every emotion needs to be expressed immediately. Mastering language is a form of self-respect, for it protects your environment, preserves relationships, and prevents unnecessary regrets. To speak calmly, even in tense situations, is a sign of emotional maturity. The Stoic knows that words can open doors or close them forever, that a thoughtless phrase can destroy what took years to build. Therefore, discipline in speaking is not a limitation, but a form of freedom. It means acting from awareness, not from chaos. It means choosing words that build, not destroy. When language becomes an instrument of self-control, life becomes more stable and relationships healthier. This discipline is not trained in easy times, but in difficult ones, when fatigue, anger, or frustration threaten to take over. Precisely when everything inside wants to explode, the Stoic takes a deep breath and waits. Not to please others, but to be at peace with themselves, to feel pride later and not regret. Thus the word becomes sacred, a reflection of the person who is developing, not of the pain that is still healing. To speak clearly, decisively, and respectfully changes the perception others have of you, but above all, it changes the relationship you have with yourself. Stoicism summarizes this in a simple truth. He who masters his tongue masters his mind. Discipline in language is an act of self-love, a declaration of inner strength. It is not about remaining silent out of fear, but out of wisdom. It is about speaking only when words are worth more than silence. In this way, every conversation becomes an opportunity to practice virtue, to show prudence, and to lead one's life from awareness and not from impulse. And when this becomes a habit, the inner energy changes, peace is strengthened, and life aligns with the best version of oneself, the power of strategic silence. In the unceasing whirlwind of modern life, where noise seems to be the constant soundtrack of our existence, overlapping conversations, digital notifications, relentlessly vying for attention, an inexhaustible stream of news and information, and an accumulation of worries piling up in the mind, leaving little room to breathe, the Stoic philosophers, far ahead of their time, already intuited that silence is much more than the mere absence of sound. For them, silence was an indispensable sanctuary, a powerful tool for self-knowledge, and a direct path to inner peace. In those crucial moments when the outside world seems to descend into chaos and agitation, silence becomes a sacred and safe space to retreat to reconnect with oneself, to gain the necessary mental clarity to navigate complexities, and to regain control over one's emotional landscape and the flow of thoughts. From the profound perspective of Stoicism, silence should not be interpreted as a form of resigned passivity in the face of circumstances, or as an escape from the world. On the contrary, it is seen as a conscious pause, a strategic mental retreat that allows one to filter out superfluous external noise and decisively focus on what truly matters internally and in the present moment. In these moments of deep silence, the mind, free from external distractions, can dedicate itself to observing its own thought patterns with serene objectivity, understanding the underlying nature of emerging emotions, and gaining a healthy distance from the reactive impulses that often dominate us. It is precisely in the fertile silence that the Stoic finds the indispensable inner space to carefully reflect and decide the wisest and most virtuous course of action in a situation, instead of simply reacting automatically out of habit or the unconscious pressure of the environment. The mental clarity and balanced perspective that arise from a state of inner calm enable the individual to make wiser decisions that are better aligned with their core values and the goal of a virtuous life. Consciously practicing silence is not only a mental discipline, but also a fundamental act of conscious self-care. Amidst the overwhelming overstimulation we face daily, both the body and mind crave a restorative break, an opportunity to tune out the constant external noise and recharge and renew life's energy. Deliberate silence significantly helps reduce chronic stress, alleviate persistent anxiety, and diminish irritability, while simultaneously strengthening physical and mental health. Modern scientific research only confirms what the Stoics intuitively recognized centuries ago. A few minutes of genuine silence each day can have a revitalizing effect on the brain, drastically improve the quality of restorative sleep, strengthen the responsiveness of the immune system, and give the mind the necessary space to process, organize, and assimilate the vast amount of information accumulated throughout the day. Thus, silence is no longer perceived as an uncomfortable void, but becomes an indispensable ally for a more conscious life, with less exhaustion and a deeper connection to oneself. For the Stoics, silence was also a subtle but effective form of self-mastery and communication of inner strength. Consciously deciding when to remain silent and when to speak is an eloquent demonstration of emotional maturity and self-control. Not every situation or remark deserves an immediate response. Not every provocation requires a verbal reaction. Strategic silence, when used wisely, conserves mental and emotional energy, avoids unnecessary conflicts that only consume life energy, and shows others that one is not a slave to their impulsive emotions or the expectations and provocations of others. One who masters the art of remaining silent at the right moment and with the right intention demonstrates a calm inner strength that inspires respect and makes a palpable difference in any situation, no matter how tense. Well-used silence, employed with wisdom and intention, can be infinitely more powerful and meaningful than 1,000 disordered or impulsive words, for it conveys control, full presence in the moment, and a wisdom that comes from inner tranquility. In summary, silence is the fertile space par excellence, where genuine personal change is cultivated and nourished. In self-chosen solitude and inner silence, one can look inward with radical honesty, recognize both one's strengths and weaknesses, and work with dedication and perseverance, free from distractions and the noise of the outside world. Silence offers a unique opportunity to connect with one's own essence, the deepest desires of the heart, and the fears that often paralyze us, and from this space of self-awareness, to begin a process of authentic and lasting growth. The Stoics found in silence the invaluable opportunity to reconcile with difficult aspects of the past, to forgive resentments that only poisoned the soul, and to strengthen their unwavering confidence in themselves and their ability to face life. In this way, silence transcends the idea of an uncomfortable void and becomes a fertile ground for deep self-reflection, emotional healing, and continuous self-improvement. Dealing with fears in solitude. Fear is a primal emotion, as old as humanity itself. The Stoic philosophers did not deny or scorn it as a weakness. Rather, they acknowledged and understood it, knowing that fear serves an essential biological and evolutionary function. It protects us and keeps us alert to the real dangers lurking in our environment. However, they also clearly recognize that when fear transcends its protective function and dominates the mind, it has the potential to become an invisible prison, a mental cage that drastically restricts our actions, hinders our boldest dreams, and impoverishes our interpersonal relationships. In today's hyper-connected and attention-hungry world, where there seems to be constant pressure to share everything, where digital platforms and everyday conversations invite us to expose even the most intimate and vulnerable facets of our being, Stoicism proposes a radically different path, a path of wisdom and self-mastery, the practice of consciously and mindfully remaining silent about one's fears until we have had the opportunity to confront them, understand them, and manage them in the intimacy of reflective solitude. The Stoics understood with astonishing psychological depth for their time that true vulnerability should not be confused with weakness. On the contrary, they saw it as an expression of courage and radical honesty towards oneself. However, true courage, in their view, does not lie in indiscriminately displaying one's open wounds to everyone we encounter, but in the wisdom of knowing when, how, and above all, with whom to share these intimate experiences. Showing our fears without having processed and internally worked through them can, in many cases, be counterproductive and even dangerous, as by verbalizing them without prior work, we risk integrating them even deeper into our identity and paradoxically granting them a greater dimension and power than they actually possess. Furthermore, indiscriminate openness without careful selection of the interlocutor can lead to unnecessary exposure to the hasty judgment, misunderstanding, and even ridicule of those who lack the empathy, maturity, or emotional preparedness to bear the complexity of others' truth. The Stoic, guided by prudence, selects their spaces and interlocutors with selective wisdom, reserving most of their internal struggles, fears, and healing processes for the fertile silence of personal reflection, meditation, or intimate dialogue with someone who can truly listen, with presence, empathy, and without hasty judgments. Stoic philosophy teaches that fear, like any other human emotion, is beyond our control at the moment of its first appearance. However, we have significant control over how we manage it, how we react to its appearance, and how we interpret the message it conveys to us. The first crucial step in this process of fear management is to observe it with objective distance, without immediately identifying with the emotion, in order to understand its origin, its nature, and the deeper message it seeks to convey to us, often related to the anticipation of pain or loss. Only after having gone through this internal process of observation and understanding, when the emotion no longer dominates us with its original intensity, is it possible to share it with others from a position of resilience, from the perspective of the healed scar, and not from the still open bleeding wound. Speaking about fears after having consciously confronted them and a process of integration has begun, radically changes the narrative. It is no longer a desperate cry for help, but becomes an inspiring testimony of overcoming, a valuable tool to illuminate the path for others who are going through similar challenges. Facing fears in the intimacy of personal silence significantly strengthens character and fosters individual autonomy. The Stoic knows that they do not need external validation, applause, or the approval of others to embark on the path of healing and growth. They understand that the most significant and profound victories are often won in the silence of internal dialogue, in that honest and courageous conversation we have with ourselves. Personal work with fear, the act of facing it in solitude, is a daily exercise in unwavering courage and radical honesty. Writing in a personal journal to articulate anxious thoughts, meditating to calm the mind, and observe the bodily sensations associated with fear, deeply reflecting on the illusory nature of many of our fears, and actively seeking the learning and strength that every challenge conceals. In this way, fear is no longer perceived as a paralyzing monster that prevents us from moving forward, but transforms through internal work into a rigorous teacher that propels our personal growth and development. Finally, when the moment comes to speak about fears, the Stoic does so with a clear intention and a defined purpose. They seek neither pity nor external validation, but rather to share an experience that has already been integrated and processed, a lesson learned in adverse circumstances that has the potential to add value, wisdom, and inspiration to the listener's life. The preceding silence, that space of internal work and emotional processing, gives weight, authenticity, and depth to the spoken words. It is this silence that transforms initially painful vulnerability into a source of shared strength, and the personal story of struggle and overcoming into a source of wisdom accessible to others. Keeping fears to oneself while processing and working on them is by no means a sign of cowardice or weakness. On the contrary, it is an eloquent sign of self-mastery, a deep act of respect for one's own delicate healing and growth process, and an unwavering commitment to one's own inner development. Avoiding the instant gratification trap. There's a curious psychological paradox. Discussing your goals, dreams, and future aspirations can create such a pleasant and satisfying feeling that, for a fleeting moment, your brain is tricked into believing you've already made significant progress toward achieving them. Simply sharing your intentions with others, verbalizing your aims, provides a small dose of instant gratification, an immediate neurological reward in the form of social recognition or praise. This preemptive reward can be a subtle trap, as it deceives your brain into feeling productive and advanced, even though in tangible reality, you haven't taken a single concrete step towards realizing those plans. The Stoic sages warned against the dangers of this tendency centuries ago. Virtue and true progress lie in consistent action and conscious effort, not in the appearance of doing or the promise to do. If you get used to receiving praise and validation simply for stating your plans, you risk losing the urgency, intrinsic motivation, and indispensable energy required to translate those verbal intentions into tangible reality. The danger is that this preemptive reward, so immediately pleasant for the brain, can lead to complacency. You relax prematurely, content with the mere act of having spoken, and without realizing it, the powerful force that drove you to act begins to dissipate. The human brain is programmed to seek pleasure and avoid unnecessary effort. When you tell others about your projects and receive a positive reaction, a sign of approval or admiration, your mind registers this interaction as a form of satisfaction, as if you had already achieved part of the goal. However, this satisfaction is hollow and superficial, as it is not based on an actual outcome but merely on the response to your words. Stoicism teaches with practical wisdom that genuine progress is often silent, that real advancement requires neither the applause of crowds nor the constant presence of external witnesses. If you make it a habit to talk at length about what you're going to do before actually starting, your internal motivation gradually weakens, as the reward in the form of social recognition has already been granted before you've earned it through your efforts. For this reason, the sages who followed Stoic philosophy preferred to work diligently in the solitude of their own space, celebrating their small or large successes in personal silence, and letting their tangible results, not their words, speak for the value of their efforts. The trap of instant gratification is particularly dangerous in today's era, where digital culture encourages constant self-display and public showcasing of all facets of life, including plans and aspirations. Social media, informal conversations, and even friend circles can create an environment that tempts one to publicly announce every self-imposed goal and every small step forward, as if the delicate and arduous process of personal change constantly needs external validation and approval to have value. However, the Stoic understands with unwavering clarity that the strongest and most sustainable motivation arises from a deep internal commitment, a motivation that does not depend on the fleeting gazes or changing opinions of others. Making talk less and do more a daily discipline is an effective way to protect your mental and emotional energy and keep you laser-focused on what truly matters: consistent, conscious, and often silent action. Significant personal growth is nourished and strengthened in the intimacy of oneself, far from distracting noise and the constant pressure to meet external expectations. When you work for yourself, without the subconscious need to seek others' approval at every turn, each of your actions, however small, is more solid, more authentic, and carries an inherent weight. Stoicism emphasizes that true and lasting satisfaction does not come from applause or external recognition, but from inner coherence, from the alignment between what you think privately, what you say publicly, if you choose to speak, and above all, what you consistently do. Learn to celebrate every small victory, every seemingly insignificant step forward, privately, and remain silent about your grand goals until their realization is so obvious and tangible that it requires no words. In this way, your internal motivation remains alive and strong, your commitment to the process deepens day by day, and your valuable energy flows where it can truly make a difference, into consistent and conscious action. The trap of instant gratification is more than that. It is a fleeting illusion that diverts you from the path to your truly important and meaningful goals. If you desire different and more substantial results in your life, you must choose a different, more effective approach. Stop wasting energy talking so much about what you plan to do, and simply start doing it. Make productive silence your strategic ally and consistent action your main language. When your achievements are an undeniable reality, when your life speaks through your actions with an eloquence that needs no words, You will discover that the strongest and most satisfying validation is that which arises from your own conscious effort and personal commitment, and not from the fleeting approval of others. Stoicism reminds you with timeless wisdom that truly significant success often prefers silence, that true greatness does not need to be loudly proclaimed, and that the deepest and most lasting satisfaction arises from moving forward purposefully, even when no one else is watching you. The art of deep listening. In a world where everyone seems to compete to be heard, true power rests with those who listen and are genuinely attentive. The Stoics understood that listening doesn't simply mean waiting for the other person to finish speaking so you can take your turn. It means being present with an open mind and heart, ready to grasp what the other truly feels and needs. Being a good listener is far more than a social skill. It's a commitment to humility and a form of conscious presence. When you choose to listen, you stop focusing on yourself and create a space where the other person can reveal themselves as they are, without fear of judgment or interruption. Attentive listening, in the Stoic sense, is an act of generosity and an active discipline. It requires silencing not only the external voice but also the incessant internal monologue, those distractions and personal thoughts that often prevent us from fully absorbing the other person's message. By quieting the inner noise and creating a space of receptivity, we open ourselves to the possibility of understanding different perspectives, empathizing with experiences we might not have had, and learning from the wisdom contained in the other person's words. The silence that precedes active listening is not an emptiness but a space full of potential, a fertile ground where mutual understanding and authentic respect can emerge. In these moments of receptive silence, the superficial layers of others' expressions can be penetrated, allowing us to access the underlying essence, the unvoiced emotions, and the unarticulated needs. The Stoic, who practices listening as a discipline, becomes a constant learner of the world and human nature. Through attentive listening, they learn not only about the other but also about themselves, as interaction with unfamiliar perspectives often illuminates aspects of oneself that had previously gone unnoticed. Silence is not just the absence of your voice, but the presence of your full attention, directed outward. This art of patient listening, without interrupting, without judging, without preparing your own response while the other person is still speaking, is a tangible expression of Stoic equanimity and self-mastery. It testifies to an inner strength that doesn't need to dominate the conversation to prove its worth, but rather finds its power in the ability to absorb, reflect, and understand. The silence of a good listener is not a sign of weakness, but an invitation to trust, a space where the other person feels safe to open up and share. In a society where communication is often reduced to parallel monologues and a competition for attention, the one who can listen with their heart stands out, building deeper and more meaningful relationships and accumulating a wisdom not found in books or speeches, but in shared and understood experiences. Silence in this context becomes a silent teacher, instructing us in patience, empathy, humility, and the ability to learn from every interaction. It reminds us that we don't always need to have an answer, that sometimes the wisest thing to do is simply to be present and listen with an open heart. By listening attentively in the quietness of our own ego, we discover that the world has much to teach us, if only we stop talking long enough to truly hear it. Rewriting your life story. Throughout their lives, many individuals become entangled in narratives born of pain, failure, or frustration. Unknowingly, they transform these stories into a kind of invisible cage, repeatedly uttering phrases like, "I always fail," "I'll never achieve that," or "That's just the way I am." Stoicism teaches that true freedom begins when you dare to challenge this narrative and decide to change it from its very foundation. This isn't about denying what has happened or pretending the past didn't exist, but about refusing to carry it as a burden any longer. The power to rewrite your story lies in recognizing that you are not your mistakes or your wounds, but what you choose to make of them. The first step to transforming your story is to meticulously observe how you speak about yourself. Every word you use to describe yourself, every explanation you give about your life, is a statement about your identity. If you consistently tell yourself you are impatient, clumsy, or incapable, your mind will conform to that image, and you will act accordingly. However, if you begin to say that you are learning to be calmer, that you are growing, that you are finding your way, you open a door to a much more powerful version of yourself. Stoicism emphasizes that it is not the facts that determine your experience, but the interpretation you give them. A changed interpretation shifts emotions, and altered emotions change your energy and your actions. Rewriting your story doesn't mean ignoring difficult moments, but giving them new meaning. You can speak of your setbacks as learning opportunities rather than evidence of inability. You can view your mistakes as part of the growth process, not as final judgments. The Stoic understands that every experience, even the most painful, can become a tool to move forward if narrated with the intention of progress. In this way, you are no longer a prisoner of old labels and give yourself permission to reinvent yourself as many times as necessary. The key lies in the conscious repetition of a new internal discourse. Every time you catch yourself saying, "I can't," replace it with, "I haven't mastered it yet, but I'm trying." If you feel trapped in thoughts of defeat, replace them with phrases that propel you forward. This exercise may seem artificial at first, but it is a way of training your mind to see possibilities where you previously only saw limitations. Stoicism teaches that the mind is like a garden. If you only water the weeds, only weeds will grow. But if you choose to sow and nurture new seeds, in time, your reality will also flourish in a different way. You are not condemned to live the same story forever. You hold the pen in your hand and can decide each day how you want to narrate yourself. Speak of yourself as someone who is already growing, as someone who knows that the past does not determine the future unless you allow it. Make every word another step towards the life you truly deserve. Don't settle for the old story just because it's familiar. Dare to write a new one with courage, foresight, and self-respect. In this way, your story will no longer be a repetition of pain, but a declaration of power and transformation. Embracing Stoic principles. We've now reached the conclusion of this exploration, inspired by the timeless wisdom of Stoic philosophers. Together, we've delved into how your personal narrative, the story you tell yourself and the world, isn't merely a passive description of your reality, but an active force that shapes it. We've come to understand that while we can't always control what happens around us, we possess the unwavering power to choose how we react, how we narrate our experiences, and how we allow these words to define our very being. We've discovered the unforeseen strength found in conscious silence, that deliberate pause that grants us clarity and safeguards our delicate process of personal transformation. And perhaps most importantly, we've grasped that true eloquence lies not in empty promises or repeated complaints, but in the powerful, quiet truth of our actions, in letting our results tell the story of who we are and who we are becoming. Embracing these Stoic principles, mastering your internal dialogue, strategically employing silence, prioritizing action over words, and having the courage to rewrite your own story, isn't a destination to reach, but a path to walk day by day, a continuous practice. It's in the daily application of these ideas that their true transformative power resides. As you integrate these teachings into your life, you'll notice a profound shift, greater serenity in the face of adversity, an inner discipline reflected in your calm and focus, more authentic relationships built on coherence and respect, and a growing sense that you are building a life aligned with your deepest values and true potential. You'll stop being a character in a script written by circumstances and become the author and protagonist of your own life. Now that you have these tools, inspired by the wisdom of the great Stoics, the real work begins. Don't let these ideas remain just words. Bring them into your life. Implement them in your conversations, your decisions, and your internal dialogue. Remember the power within you to choose your reaction, to use silence as a refuge and strength, and to let your actions speak for themselves. Your journey toward a more resilient, meaningful, and peaceful life will be built word by word and action by action. If this message has resonated with you, and you feel motivated to embark on or continue this path, I wholeheartedly invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, to explore more topics that nourish the soul and mind together, and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our future contributions. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Which of these ideas do you find most challenging or most valuable? Thank you for accompanying me on this journey. Apply what you've learned, and you will see how silence and words, when used with wisdom, have the power to transform your reality.